Perfect. All right. Welcome, everyone. I'm super excited to have you all here. We are going to talk about increasing your conversion in your sales process. My name is Nicole Gallop. I am VP of Recruiting and Onboarding here at Cultivate, which means I probably was a part of overseeing the hiring of your amazing advisor, and I make sure that they all are welcomed into the Cultivate family and ready to kick out of the gates with you. However, in the past, I've also run our sales department at Cultivate, which is why I'm super stoked to talk to you about how to increase you and your team's sales conversion in pursuit of hitting your 2021 revenue goals. So that's what we're here for. How do we go and hit our 2021 revenue goals through increasing our sales conversion? So my big outcome for everyone today is that in an hour, all of you have at least 2 takeaways that you can go take action on starting today. So that's our big outcome for today. So have your notes ready. That's what we're going for. So to dive in here, first, I want to understand what is your back-end sales conversion right now. So I'll explain a couple things, but I want everyone to hop in the chat and share. So to explain that, when I say your back-end sales conversion, for example, at Cultivate, we do a free advising session with somebody before they become a client. So our conversion from free advising session to client generally is 40%. So that would be our back-end sales conversion. The second thing I want to explain for you, your business, not you. So you might be the best closer since the end of time. For your business, what is the back-end sales conversion of your business? And I want you to pop into the chat and pick one of these buckets. I don't know what it is. 5 to 20%, 20 to 35%, 35 to 50, or 50% plus. So pop into the chat and share one of those 5 buckets as your back-end sales conversion. And that'll give us a feel for where we're working from today, and who we have in the room here. Perfect. If you just joined, you're going to look at the screen. I want you to share what your back-end sales conversion is in your business. Perfect. Awesome. All right, so keep piling those in. It'll help us get a read of the room and who we're working with here. If you wrote, I don't know, thank you for sharing that. And what I want you to do is go write it on your list to take to your advisor. You need to go figure out a CRM, some tracking. It's a really important number to know. If you're in the 5 to 20% range, usually that means we need to get a bit more of a process, okay? So do I have clear sales steps? Do I have tools and scripts? If you're in that bucket, that's a good one to take to your advisor. If you're in 20 to 35%, usually that means you're like, I've got a sales process that I'm following. We find if somebody has a sales process, they're typically around 35%. But yeah, they have it and they follow it, 2 different things. You have a sales process and you follow it, usually around 35%. 35 to 50, awesome. You've been getting some skill development on that process, maybe with your advisor. And if you're 50% plus, you might be an all-star, which very might well be what it is. However, I also just want to ask you a couple questions, plant in the back of your mind before we dive into our content today. Am I landing great clients? Maybe you're taking everyone on. Is my pricing right? Maybe my pricing's too low and everyone's just taking on the great deal. Or how big is my marketing funnel? If you're getting all of your clients from referrals, I would hope you'd have an over 50% closing conversion. So how big is my marketing funnel? So that's some things to kind of plant in the seed to work with your advisor on. But today, the goal is, can we increase those sales conversions from wherever you're starting? So we're going to talk about tactics to create urgency, tightening the close, and how to coach sales rep events to help your team increase their closing conversion. We'll do some takeaways, wrap up, and have some Q&A at the end. And I've got 2 fabulous panelists I'm going to be bringing up, Angie and Colin, and they're going to drop some genius on this through this as well. So let's dive in here. So we're going to talk about tactics to create urgency first. So back into the chat, I want everyone to pop into the chat and share, how do you define urgency in the sales process? What is your definition of urgency? If you were bringing great urgency in your sales process, what would that look like? What would that mean? So what is sales urgency for you? When I say, let's go increase urgency in our sales process, what's that mean to you? Perfect. I'm seeing some sign the contract in the meeting, ability to control close dates, get people over the line. Perfect. Perfect. So that's some definition of how do we define urgency. And when I'm talking to people about how do we define urgency, I find they tend to fall into 2 camps. Camp number 1, They're like, awesome, Nicole, let's talk about urgency. I want all of the deals to land on the spot, okay? And what that creates is like, if we go back to Christmas season, you're like, I can see the most beautiful Christmas tree ever. The expectations are through the roof. And then you're like, reality, you get this little pipsqueak of a tree. And in between that, our expectations and our reality is where frustration and disappointment lives when we fall short. So when we talk about building urgency, don't get me wrong, I love landing deals on the spot. And I actually really believe that many or most deals can land on the spot if we do a bunch of things properly. However, that's not my definition of urgency. But on the flip side, before I share my definition of it, I also have people in the camp of, I don't want to talk about building urgency, Nicole, because I don't want people to feel pressured. I don't want people to feel uncomfortable. I don't want them to buy from me if they don't want to. It's just a really big values thing for them to make sure that people feel good and buy from them when they're ready and when they're ready to take the step. And I fully support and agree with that mindset as well. So here's my definition of urgency that merges these two camps. Creating sales urgency is increasing your prospect's decision timeline in relation to where they started. Increasing the decision timeline in relation to where they started. So what does that mean? If they were going to make a decision in a year and you helped them make a decision in 6 months, that's a win. If they were going to make a decision in 2 weeks and then instead they make a decision on the spot, that's a win. Urgency is about getting them to take action sooner than they would have otherwise. And so when we talk about the tactics today around how to increase urgency in the sale, we're using all the same tactics, just to increase the timeline in which they take action. So let's dive into it here. So how do you go create urgency? You gotta be a detective. There is a reason they have not taken action previously, okay? Your job is to figure out what's the need and why haven't they taken action already? We've all talked to people like that. I've been thinking about buying your service for years or months. They've been thinking about it for a long time. Why haven't they taken action? That's what you need to figure out, and how you build urgency is to figure out what those are, what those blocks are, and remove them, and help them get those out of the way so that they can take action. This is actually one of the reasons I'm really passionate about sales, is because sales is about helping people. And when we lose sight of helping people, that's when sales processes become uncomfortable or inefficient. And so keep your eye on, how do I help them take action to solve their problem? And that's going to authentically build urgency. So the first tactic we're going to talk about for this, how to create gap. You create urgency by being a detective, and you help them go and create gap in order to get them to take action. So what's gap? Okay, gap is helping them figure out, where are you now? In this example, you are in the middle of some very dirty water. That's where you are right now. It's about helping them see reality of where currently they exist. It's also about helping them get clarity on where they want to go. Where do you want to be? I want to be on a beach with super clean blue water for miles and miles. That's where I want to be. But right now I'm in this murky, dirty water. The gap is, how do we get there? Okay. And yes, I'm talking about a sales tactic here, but it's a coaching exercise. Put your coaching hat on during your sales meeting and help them get clear on these 2 points, and the gap will naturally materialize. So how do you go create that gap? You got to ask questions to help them realize it. You're not creating a gap artificially. You're helping them see a gap that already exists with clear new eyes, helping them take the rose-colored glasses off, okay? And the result is, when you do that, urgency is created organically and authentically. If I want to get here by this time, that means I have to take action. You're helping them see that so that they take urgency on their own initiative. So once you have that, however, okay, there's a gap that exists, they know where they are, they know where they're going to go. What do I do with it at that point? And you're going to talk about the cost of action and the cost of inaction. So we're actually going to go look at about a 30-second clip around what this looks like to give you guys an example.
So what if you don't get the returns you want from the social media ads?
Well, then we won't be able to make our fourth quarter numbers.
And what are the ramifications for the business?
If we don't meet our numbers, we're going to lose some serious headcount in the new year.
Okay, so it sounds crucial that we make an adjustment to these numbers so we avoid losing headcount. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Perfect. I will share my screen here again. And so you can see in that example, right? Absolutely, it was actors. It's a fake scenario. That's not necessarily how real life always sounds, but it's a good example of, you can see the guy was asking them questions. What's the impact if you don't make the change? What's the impact if you don't hit these goals? We're going to lose a bunch of headcount. That's a great example of the cost of inaction that helps them bring urgency towards their goals. The cost of action on the flip side is, how much is it going to cost to solve this problem? Okay, this is where I need to go. This is where my path is to get there. How much is it going to cost to solve that? The important values-based mindset of this is, it's not about your product. It's not about you. It's about helping them get to their solution, their benefit, their goal, and buying your product helps them do that. So what's the cost of action to help them get towards their goal? So with that said, I'm going to invite up Angie here to the stage, and we are going to ask her some questions so she can share some thoughts around how to bring urgency into the sale. Perfect. Welcome, Angie.
Good morning, Nicole.
Good morning. Awesome. Well, we're excited to hear what you have to say on this part. So first question for you. What are the 2 keys in your mind around how to build urgency?
Certainly. I think there are more than 2, but the 2 that are top of mind for me are building confidence that you're the one who can solve their problem. And you do this by alleviating their fears or reducing their perceived risk. And that includes answering their questions, overcoming their objections. And you do it honestly and you do it patiently so that you're showing empathy and understanding throughout that. And in cases where they may be viewing the risk a little bit more intensely than what is real, just helping them get clear on what is the actual risk versus what they think it is. And then the other piece that is key is building the case for ROI. So for many of us, depending on what our business is, you can speak very directly to the dollars and cents. If you spend this, you get this in return. What is the value of that to you? Can you imagine if we were able to help you get X? In other cases, you have to speak to the tangible benefits, but they're non-monetary. So what would it be like if you had energy to get out of bed every day? What would it mean for you if you could eliminate your back pain that you've had for 10 years? So what are those? Those are real benefits and they're tangible, but they don't have a dollar value on them per se. So you have to be able to speak to that and get your prospect to actually think through what is that the gain for them.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, really helping them see like what is the game for you. The closing there. Perfect.
Absolutely.
When it comes to urgency, I find a lot of people have, the idea of buy now or limited time only or only one left type thing. So typically that has a negative connotation. So are there times when this is an appropriate tactic to use? What are your thoughts?
Yes, absolutely. It's an appropriate tactic when it is true. So I think of this in terms of if you are in a business where you have limited capacity to add new business. So for example, consulting business, if you have a solopreneur or a small staff and your engagements are very time consuming or all engaging, all consuming, you can't take on an infinite number of new clients. And I think it's fair to share that with people you're talking to so they understand the reality. In a similar vein, if you are an event planner, if you have a venue, if you're a wedding photographer, there are only 52 weekends in the year. Most weddings happen on a weekend. And at least here in the States, May and June are 2 of the most popular wedding months. So I think it's completely fair and logical if you're talking to somebody who wants a May or June wedding to say, I'm already booked for 2 of those weekends or 4 of those weekends. If you want to secure your date and you think this is the best decision for you, I recommend you do it sooner than later.
Yeah. What I'm hearing on that is just like, be authentic and be true and help them see this is your reality. If you want to get married in 2 months, let's get cracking, right?
Absolutely. And I know for a lot of us, it can feel like we're being pushy or you don't want to tell somebody you have to make a decision now. But I think in those cases, we also owe it to them to lay out the facts. You're being transparent. You're not being pushy. I don't want you to call me back 2 weeks before the beginning of June and tell me you want to book that wedding. That's never going to happen. Or, there's no way I'm going to still be available at that point.
Yeah. What's interesting comes to mind as you say that is, a lot of time people only hire a wedding photographer once. They don't know, right? You're informing them about that. Same as
very true.
You only paint your house once every 10 years. Like, you got to inform them, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Information, education, not being pushy.
Perfect. Okay. On the other vein, so a lot of B2C businesses use incentives like special pricing, discounts to get clients to buy now. What advice can you kind of offer around these tactics strategically?
Yes, I've had a lot of conversations about this over the years. And what I recommend is keeping an eye on the margins and the client behavior. Make sure it's better for the business in the long run. One way to think about it is, are you actually improving the business, or are you attracting the wrong type of client or teaching your clients to wait for coupons? And I think we can all think of retailers who always have coupons available, and a lot of us won't even think about shopping there, whether online or offline now, or in person, if we don't have a coupon in hand. And that is not the behavior that is generally better for those of us in the small business community. One of my favorite examples around the type of, knowing what types of coupons are good for the business and what types are not good. I have a lot of experience in automotive service and repair. And if you talk to somebody outside of the industry, they will typically say, oh, you should offer a free oil change or a $9.99 oil change. That'll get people to come in. They'll come in and give you a try. But what actually happens in those cases is that it attracts the wrong type of client. It is attracting somebody who will drive 30 minutes out of their way to save $5 on an oil change, and who has absolutely no intention of maintaining their car. They don't care if the tires are bald. They don't care if the transmission fluid is black. They want to save that $5. So if you're doing a lot of that, you can end up working your team to death because they're taking care of all these clients and not really making any money. Because oil changes, even at a regular price, oil changes are a low profit service. The flip side of that is, for the shops that I've worked with where we've done a tiered offer, so save $10 when you spend $100, save $25 when you spend $300, save $50 on $500. Those bring in the clients who know they need work, who know they might need tires or brakes, other services that are higher dollar amounts, higher profit margin, and it works better for everybody involved.
Fair enough. Perfect. Okay. Perfect. So I guess we talked a lot about Gap. And so my question is for you, what are some of your favorite questions that you use to ask Gap, especially B2B world?
Yeah. So I have a journalism background. So I came out of college being really comfortable asking random strangers questions. And I often, when I'm doing my free advising sessions and my initial calls, get a lot of comments on, wow, those are really good questions. I haven't thought about that. So some of my favorite, just softer questions that get to the Gap, but they're a little bit softer, but a little bit more on the warm-up side of things is, why did you decide to sit down with me today? What has been happening in business or in your life that makes you want to talk about this now, as opposed to 6 months ago? What's working well now? What's not working well now? What are you looking for some help and support on? Those are, like I said, the softer ones. If you are more direct, if you feel like you've built up enough trust and credibility with or rapport with the person you're talking to, you can go is being very straightforward with, what are the 2 biggest pain points you'd like to solve? What's keeping you up at night? What do you want me to help you with? And depending on what they tell you, then you can ask several follow-up questions to learn more about each of those things. And it can be as simple as, oh, tell me more about that. Or you said this, tell me more about what's happening there.
Perfect. Thank you. Those are some good questions. Excellent. Different question for you. What role does scheduling and deadlines play in urgency in your mind?
Yeah, so I think of this as the person that you're talking to, what is it they want to accomplish, and how long is that really going to take? And how long does it compare to what they think it's going to take? So for example, If you are if you have a marketing company and somebody says, we're dead right now, I need the phone ringing tomorrow, or I want to double the business in the next 6 months. I want to open another location in 90 days. I need a COO and I need them yesterday. Those are scenarios where the business owner either hasn't been too busy or they don't know all the things that have to happen to hit that end goal. And they have an unrealistic expectation of how much time and how many steps are involved. So in the sales process, it's our responsibility, again, to educate, to help them think through the timeline and set expectations around that timeline. So at the very basic, you're building up credibility and helping them understand that you know what has to happen, and you're helping them to understand as well. So that can either help them see that their goal isn't realistic and get to more realistic expectations, but it also prevents you from setting both of you up for failure. So if somebody says, I want to double my business overnight, and you just go along on that ride, it's more stressful for you. It's much less likely you're actually going to hit that end goal in the time allotted, and it could just end up being a total disaster. The other piece of this is if you slow the business owner down or the prospect, whomever it is you're talking to, and you walk them through what's involved, it builds up your value and your expertise. But in some cases, it also helps them realize how much work actually is going to be involved. And they may come to the decision that they don't want to do it all. And that's okay, because they've saved both of you a lot of time, and it allows you to get on to the next prospect who is possibly a better fit for you.
What I'm really hearing in that is, where are you now? Where are you going? What's the steps that need to be taken there? What's the timelines we need to hit in order for us to be able to hit the goal? And so therefore, I need a decision if you want us to get to this place. So
yes, absolutely.
Perfect. All right. My last question for you here is, what else would you say is just key to building urgency for somebody who's listening today?
Sure. I think I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but active and careful listening, making sure they know they're heard, connecting your service or solution to their specific pain points. Don't go off on a tangent with all the great things that you do. Focus on what they're there to have addressed. Use stories to show them how you will specifically help them. And this builds confidence in what you're offering and helps reduce their fears, which goes back to my point from earlier, which is helping to overcome their fears and their perceived risk. You want to make sure that you have all the decision makers present. I'm sure we can all think of the time when we did a phone call and we got really excited because the person we were talking to loved our product, loved our service, and wasted a lot of time because they weren't the actual decision maker. The sooner you get everybody in who will be involved in that decision, the better it is for you to get to a yes or a no. And it also saves you a lot of time and headache and chasing people down. The last thing I would add to the list here is, as you're going through a sales conversation, check in with questions to make sure that they're resonating with what you're saying, that what you're saying is resonating with them, and also start to get them to actively engage in the process. So how does that sound to you? Do you see where this would help you with A or B? Tell me, what about that resonates with you? And that helps to start to get their buy-in and helps you to see that they're buying it. And the flip side of that is, if you ask those questions and you're just getting no answer, or you're getting vague answers, that can tell you that you've missed something, that there's a disconnect there, either with trust and rapport, or what you're saying isn't hitting the mark for them. So it can help you slow down a little bit and maybe dig in ask some more questions to understand what they're thinking in that moment.
Perfect. Well, thank you for dropping your genius on us, Angie. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
That was great. Perfect. Well, that's some tools for you around how to build urgency so we can close these deals and hit our 2021 revenue goals. But next, let's go talk about how to tighten the close. So here's my big tip on how to tighten the close. Ask for the job. we can't do anything else towards tightening the close if we're not trying to close it, okay? So super simple, you gotta ask for the job, and that's as simple as the advice is today. So I will talk about other stuff, but that's the important one here. And so when I say ask for the job, same thing, people usually fall into two camps during this conversation. Number one, they're like, I get surprised at the end when I ask for the job. You're like, wait. So will you work with me? You're like, what? They said yes? What? They said no? That's pretty common. You're like, I thought that it was a yes. We were grooving and moving the whole time. I was sure it was going to be yes. Or I really thought that it was I didn't think it would be a no. So that's kind of surprised at the end is one feeling people can have. The other one is they can be nervous to ask. I don't know if anyone's experienced this. I know I have. You're working through the sales meeting. You're like, oh man, I got to ask for the job soon. And the butterflies start to come up in your stomach. You're like, I got to ask for the job. They can sense that fear coming. And so that can be a second nerves around why people can be hesitant to ask for the job. So here's my answer for you today. Your answer to alleviating those feelings is trial closing. So we're going to talk about trial closing today in pursuit of not being surprised at the end and not feeling nervous. Because when you trial close, the goal is that you always ask for the deal, but you don't ask for the deal until you're confident the answer is yes. And when we have those two in play, it means everyone feels good at the end. Nobody feels pressured, all the warm feels, okay? So that's why we're talking about trial closing. You always ask, we don't miss that piece. We're also super confident at the end that they're gonna say yes based on how we approach it. So let's talk about trial closing so that, again, we don't have that pressured feel at the end. So here's some examples of trial closing questions, and Angie started sharing some as well. There's tons of them. But here's what they sound like. How are you seeing that this could help you hit your goal? Can you see you and your team using this product? Based on what we've discussed, what gets you most excited? Okay? These are some examples of trial closing questions that you can use throughout the conversation to check in where they're at. And this is why it's important, is because the answers that they give you to those questions is going to tell you whether they're cold, warm, or hot. And we are going to do very different things depending upon how we classify their response as cold, warm, or hot. So let's unpack those. So if they're cold, can you see you and your team using this product? No, they are very cold. Do not go ask for the job. That will be awkward, all right? And I'm pretty sure it'll be a no. So when they're cold and you ask a question like that, and you get a response like that, what you need to do is you need to go ask another question, okay? Oh, okay, like what's their needs? What are you trying to solve? Like you missed the boat somewhere, okay? So if you get a cold response like that, go ask another question. Don't go ask for the job. Number two, they're warm. So can you see you and your team using this product? Maybe. Okay. What are some of the things that excite you the most? Well, this maybe, or this, or this. They're not cold. They're warm. All right. They're not ready to be asked for the job. Okay. You'll spook them. All right. So they're warm. So when they're warm, you need to strengthen your story. This can sound lots of ways, but for example, you could share a client comparable. Once we worked with a client like yourself, they were struggling with the same type of thing. This was the result. You could share a couple other features that you maybe haven't talked to yet that help their need. So you need to strengthen your story to warm them up more, okay? The third one is they're hot, and this is the funnest one, all right? So you're like, can you see using this product? They're like, yes. You're like, what excites you the most about this? This and this and this and this. You're like, all right, they are ready to close, all right? And those people, that's when you ask for the job. And so your goal through the sales process is to take them from cold to warm to hot so you can ask for the deal and close it. That's your goal. And so these trial questions help you figure out where are we at and what's the next thing I need to do to warm them up more. So it's kind of like taking their temperature all the time. We're all taking our temperature a lot more these days with COVID. It's like taking their temperature during a sales meeting. Are you warm now? Are you cold now? Okay, I need to warm them up a little bit more until they get to hot, which is the second piece of it. Trial closing is really important because it will tell you when is the moment to ask for the sale when everyone's ready at the table. So that's a little bit about trial closing. Switching modes here when we talk about tightening the close, okay? I want you to write down your two most common objections that you get at the close. You're like, all right, Nicole, I asked for the job, but then they sick me from the side and they ask me, give me an objection I didn't even see coming, all right? I want you to take a moment, write down what are the two most common objections you hear at the end, If you want to share it in the chats to share with other people, that's super helpful. Feel free. What are the 2 most common closing objections? And I'm going to give you a little time to write those down. It's very important that you have these in the back of your mind so you can run the rest of the stuff we're going to talk about through those examples. Yeah, I'm not ready. Bayat is a really good one. We're still looking at a lot of options. Perfect. So the 2 most common objections, having those written down for you. Cost and schedule. Cost is usually a really common one. Perfect. Perfect. So keep writing those down. Make sure you're clear on your most common 2. Usually people have a pet peeve of which 2 they get at the end. And let's go talk about how we address those. So your objection tools. You have 3 objection tools to approach these couple that are coming at you here. Number 1 is mindset. Look at those objections you just wrote down. Do you believe they're true? Okay? If you think that you are too expensive, you're hooped. I'm going to give you a bunch of other tools, but it's not going to help. You got to get your mindset straight. So when you look at the objection, do you think it's fair, accurate, true, justified, all those things? Okay? If the answer is yes to that, do not pass go, do not collect $200. Take those to your advisor and say, advisor, help me move through my mindset of why I should charge this much and why it's a great value for the client. So mindset's your first one. Second one, proactive, okay? This is a really great skill to get coaching on from your advisor around how do I pull objections forward from the end and handle them proactively up front. Metaphorically, I call it like dismantling the bomb, okay? So that's proactive objection handling. How do I pull them from the back end into the front end so they don't even show up at the end? So go talk to your advisor about that one, because what I'm going to talk about is reactive. We're talking about how to tighten the close. So when you get an objection at the end, how do you handle it reactively when it arises up at the end? So let's go have a look at that one. So reactive objection handling. All right. So there are 5 steps on how to reactively handle an objection when it comes up. First things first to notice. It's a circle, okay? You sit in objections until you've worked through them, okay? And that's how you get comfortable in sitting in objections, which is very important. We're just going to work through the objections. I'm going to roll round and round and round the circle until I figure out an answer, okay? So I'm going to walk you through the details of what it is, but that's the mindset. Round and round we go. Where we stop, nobody knows. So that's reactive objection handling. Next, let's walk through each of the steps. So 1, ask for the deal. Will you buy from me? Objection. You don't have to do anything there. They'll just give it to you. The third step, clarify and validate. So you need to make sure that you are super clear on what is the root of the objection here. For example, this is too expensive. You need to go ask 3 to 5 probing questions to unpack what is the root here. So for example, you might find out through that probing, it's not that it's too expensive, it's that I don't see the value here. Like I don't see value in what you're selling. It might be not it's too expensive, it's I see a ton of value, but I don't know how I can afford it. How we solve those 2 obstacles, to go back to our detective standpoint, are going to be very different. How we work through that is going to be very different. Then we go into share information. So sharing information on, this is where you put all of the great things we've talked about in previous webinars. Llama, feel, felt, found. You can share client stories, personal stories, share the information you think they're not taking into account, and then get validation and buy-in. Does that make sense? Is that how you're seeing it? Does that change things in your mind? Get validation and buy-in, and then guess what? The answer is yes to that, yes for the deal again. And I can't tell you how many times I've gone around this circle and I asked for the deal again, and the answer is yes at that point. What's most common mistake here is clarify and validate. If I was to go watch 100 people do this circle, 80 to 90 of them, I'm going to give feedback on clarify and validate. This is the most common step that is shortcutted or skipped over because we just want to share the information that they're not taking into account. What that does is it brings up the defense walls of your prospect, and then you end up kind of doing ping pong. You're kind of playing whack-a-mole. You're solving 5 different things because you don't know the root of the issue that's holding them back from taking action. And that's our job, is to help them clear the obstacles so they can take action. Last thing I'll share on this is the mindset around this objection handling. It's just problem solving. Absolutely, we're selling, but put your problem solving hat on, and your goal is to just help them move those obstacles. And as long as you stay there authentically, they're going to feel it, and you're going to be able to sit and handle objections longer than you would have otherwise if you were just trying to sell them and force them into a sale. So that's my high level on reactive objection handling. Clarify and validate before you respond so you know you're responding to the right thing. Number 2, objection handling equals problem solving the blockers so they can take action. Back to the detective analogy. So that's a bit around reactive objection handling. My last share here before we bring up Colin to drop some knowledge on us is schedule next steps, okay? Don't fumble the ball at the end. You've done all these great things. Then you get to the end. Reactively objection handling, you're like, okay, it sounds like you gotta go talk to your business partner. It sounds like you gotta go ask your accountant this thing. Great. Schedule a next step about that, okay? It's not a tight close if it's a messy process at the end. So always have a clear next step towards getting that goal and getting the decision ultimately. So that's some knowledge around how to tighten the close. And so with that said, I want to bring Colin up and we'll pick his brain for a little bit here, see what he has to share. Perfect.
All right.
Just to introduce Colin a little bit here, he is a closer. I think he dreams about sales. He's a closing master. So that's my brag about you, Colin. So perfect. Well, Colin, my first question for you. What are the actual words that you use to ask for the job? If you just lay it out for people.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
All right. I like to use the words, do you want to team up and do this? Now, there's a bunch of variations of this. Like there's an advisor, Simone, her version is, you ready to rock and roll? And again, I sound like kind of silly when I say that, but she sounds totally natural. So I think that the critical elements is that there's partnering language. So do you want to team up, join forces, something like that? And then just being direct. Like you asking passive questions like, how do you feel about this? Or what do you think? Like that's weak sales. So I would just be really direct about what you're trying to do, and you've earned the right to ask for it if you've done everything up to that point correct. And the only time I won't just ask is if I know it's a go. And then at that point, I won't even ask. So, I've done B2B and B2C. So when I used to sell paint jobs, if they were saying things like, yeah, so when you guys come out or when we choose our color, like if I heard that kind of language, I wouldn't even ask. I'd be like, great. So does this budget or does this price fit your budget? Yeah, cool. Did you want to start in June or July? Because again, if you give somebody the opportunity to procrastinate, they'll almost always take it. So if you know it's a go, just don't give it to them.
Perfect. Sounds good. Moving forward in that. Perfect. All right. My next one for you is, where do you see people often make mistakes when it comes to the close?
The most common one that I've seen during COVID is getting weird about money. It's getting awkward and getting weird about money at the end. And I think this comes from there's a lot of people that are tight financially right now, which totally makes sense. And there's sort of like a guilt complex where, again, if I'm in a design build company and I'm charging somebody $300,000 for this new addition, and you see that number and you're like, oh my goodness, that's such a big number, that's going to come across to the person. So I never look at it as how much they're going to spend. I look at it as how much ROI are they going to get out of this. That's why it's really easy for me to ask in the business to business world, because I know I'm going to get ROI for the person. So it's not even a question as to whether that's going to happen. So it's really easy for me to ask for that. But same thing, like in that scenario, if I'm a design build company and I charge someone $300,000, how much is that house going to be worth after that addition? Definitely more than whatever the cost was. So it's really easy for me to see it and ask for it that way. And I find people often will talk too much, try to justify and say things like, I know it's a lot, but blah, blah, blah. Like, again, none of that's necessary. I would just ask for it the same way you'd ask your friend for $10 for gas. Like, hey, I need $10 to fill up my tank. Hey, I need $300,000. I want to make an addition on your house.
Okay. Perfect. I'm hearing, don't be weird. It's just money. And number 2, I like this one you're hitting around, like talking too much. I know I've seen people just talk themselves right out of a deal because they get nervous and weird at the end. So perfect. Next one, what are some things that you can do to flip the script and make the client actually sell themselves versus you selling them?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing there is making them do little things for you throughout the process. Like make them make little commitments to you. So for example, if I'm working with a business owner, before the meeting that I have with them to go through a free advising session, I'll be like, hey, send me this, that, and the other. I want to look at it. And then if they don't send it to me, I'll call them back and make them, do a little bit more. We'll do a lot of work in the meeting. Or again, if I'm selling something to a client, more B2C, I'll be like, hey, send me this sample, this sample, this sample. and I'll make them do a little bit of homework, because if they're willing to do that for me, they're usually willing to go the extra step for me. So I'll give them little assignments to do throughout the process that are easy, but still make commitments. And then throughout the process, I'll also say things like, okay, so here's what we do. Does this seem right? Is this worth even continuing to talk about? Again, I know they're going to say yes, because I know they're into it, but I want them to then get used to saying yes to me. So I'll make them, I'll kind of have that, hey, I'll walk away if this isn't the right thing for you. But then they'll say, no, don't, let's keep going. And again, that'll help kind of create a little more of the buy-in.
Very cool. Very cool. I like that. The little commitments that then make the big commitment a little less big. Perfect. Next, what can you do well in advance of the close to make the moment of truth easier?
I don't have anything new to add. I thought Angie did a great job earlier talking about the ROI. I think that talking about money as early on in the process as you possibly can is the best thing you can do there. And actually doing the math, not just talking about, like, actually doing the math and showing them the math of how much ROI they would get as a result of working with you or investing in your product or whatever it is, so that throughout the whole meeting, they have time to process it and justify it. If you wait till the very end to talk about it, it's just too much too soon, and they'll often short circuit.
Got it. Perfect. That's a good example for the group here around like the proactive objection handling. If you're always getting the money objection at the end, just start talking about it earlier, like Colin's saying, and it'll give them time to process it. Perfect. If you don't get an immediate yes when you do ask for the job, how do you recommend you proceed based on that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that helped me is I liked, again, Angie's journalism background. So I would write the 5 W's of the who, what, where, when, why. Your circle was spot on. I think that at the end of the day, just don't be weird, slow down, be cool about it, and just ask questions. Like, it'd be weird if they didn't have any objections if it's like a big investment. So again, just slow down, ask some questions. And I have a tendency to talk a little faster when I'm nervous. So one of the things I would often do is I would write the 5 W's at the top of my notes that I was taking in for the meeting. And I would also write the word slow down in big capital letters so that I don't change my pace or my tonality or my countenance when I'm talking to somebody at the very end about, usually it's price or some other objection, but just slow down and be cool and problem solve.
Perfect. We're hearing a big theme from you, Colin. Just don't be weird. All right, everyone. It's just sales. Don't be weird. So, perfect. And then last one here is there anything different about closing during a pandemic versus normal life, whatever that is that we can't remember anymore? What's different around a pandemic?
Yeah, I think it increases the importance of closing on the spot. And I think it increases the importance of you creating, positioning your product or service as a need to have and not a want to have or a nice to have kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So I forget who said it earlier, but I really like that idea of how much are you losing by not doing this versus how much could you gain. People will usually act more urgently to avoid a loss than they will to realize a gain. So I think that's really important that in the meeting itself, you're doing the ROI calculation, not just on how much they would gain, but how much they're losing by not doing this. Again, if you're selling cutting boards, right, and this person, that's a referral tactic for real estate agents, and they're not using that, I would want to know how much they're losing by not getting referrals. And there's a whole different way of framing it. Again, I also think it increases the urgency of doing it on the spot, just because people will second guess themselves. There's a lot of fear right now. And a line that I'll often use is, I'll do the close. I'll be like, so do you want to team up and do this? And they'll be like, I want to, I just don't want to spend the money. And I'm like, right, that makes sense. So just going back, like, is it a bigger risk that we would get 1 or 2 jobs in a quarter to pay for us working together, or to go do all this stuff by yourself in a pandemic? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times that's the thing that kind of just helps with the problem solving to get them across the line. And again, it's easier for me to do that because I've seen so many people not do that, and then I follow up with them 6 months later, and they're in the exact same position. Like, if you had done something totally different and you're just taking off, that's one thing, but you're just doing nothing, right? So it's just easier for me to want to, like, push forward certain times because I know it's the right thing for the person. Same thing with selling paint jobs. Like, if I sold paint jobs and then I came back the next year and the house was still deteriorating and wasn't in great shape, it just increases the urgency to move forward because that person's better off, and I know they're going to be better off.
Yeah. As you talk, Colin, I'm hearing such a strong mindset of, I know this is the right decision for that person, and the conviction that it gives you to therefore handle the objections from our mindset conversation. Very interesting. Awesome. Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Colin. That was great. Thanks for dropping some genius on us.
Thanks.
Perfect. All right. Well, group, that takes us to our third topic here for today, how to coach a sales rep event. Okay. So let's first talk about training versus coaching. All right. What's the difference? All right. So when you're training your sales reps, that is when you are transferring knowledge to them. You're training and teaching them what the sales process is, what the tools are. You're training them. Versus coaching is the transfer of skill. This is the most common mistake that I see with people when they're working with their sales reps, is they're like, I trained them on sales. I gave them all the tools. I showed them our process. They should be closing. The answer is no. If I explained to you how to fly a plane and then handed you a bunch of checklists, would you be ready to fly a plane? No, I am not volunteering to be on that plane that first time. All right. It's the exact same with your sales reps. So you got to slow down and train them, but also coach them. They need somebody alongside them to support them and provide feedback and such. And so what I want to walk you through is, how do you coach them? How do you walk them through that? And so this is our circle, and our acronym is PDFF. All right. There are 4 steps to the coaching process: prep, do, feedback, and follow up. And you can see this is also a circle. The theme for today is circles. Just keep doing it. Round and round and round we go. All right. So that's the 4-step process for the coaching process. So I'm going to walk you through each of them, but I'll share up front the most common mistake that I see is that people skip prepping and they skip follow-up. They do the event, they give feedback, and they miss the bookends, and you miss a large percentage of your return on investment of going and coaching that person. So let's walk through it at a high level. Prep, you need to prep the learner. You need to ask them, what do they want to learn? What do they think's going good? What do they want feedback on? And get them in this learning mindset and ready to move their skill. You need to prep yourself. You need to ask yourself, what do I think the issue is? I think they're really passive. I need to move their passive skill in this. So you got to prep both yourself and the learner. Then you go do the event, okay? So this is go complete a live sales event together. They can run it, you can watch, you can run it, they can watch, you could tag team it. This could be live. It could also be a recording. So you could do the prep, have them go do the event on their own and send you a recording feedback. That's a good time-saving hack. But you go do a live event together. Next part is feedback, all right? The most important part of feedback, the learner goes first, okay? So when we go into feedback, it's important the learner goes first, because if they give themselves the feedback, they're far more likely to do it, all right? So if they say, oh, I need to go be more like this, or I missed this part, they're more likely to remember it, because the process of reflecting and thinking and being like, oh, shoot, I need to go do this, they're more likely to remember it, because literally neurons are connecting in their brain as they remember that and think through that problem. After they coach themselves and you support them in that, then you share your feedback and say, here's what I'm seeing needs to move. The last step here is follow-up. You could be the best coach in the world, all right? You could go have an amazing event, prep great, do the event, give great feedback. You walk away, you're like, awesome, they get it. How much of that is sticking 2 weeks later? Follow-up, follow-up, follow-up. Your coaching is only as strong as your follow-up. So what does that look like? At the end of feedback, once you guys have talked about the roots and aligned on what they want to go work on, you need to always have your events end with, great, how can I support you in implementing this? What does follow-up look like? How do we follow up on this to make sure that it becomes second nature over the next 60 to 90 days? Okay, that's a very important thing, to make sure you don't just drop knowledge and walk away, but you're there till it's fully implemented. That will maximize the impact of your coaching time. So that's a bit of our coaching process, okay? And so we have a PDF that we're gonna drop in the chat here, and it has this coaching process chart. It also has some terminology about our reactive problem solving circle that we looked at to kind of slow that down and give you some tools around that for next steps. So with all that said, we've gone through tactics to creating urgency, tightening the close, and how to coach a sales rep event. So I want everyone to hop in the chat. We started this with a clear goal. Everyone walks away with 2 things that they can focus on to increase their sales conversion in pursuit of hitting their 2021 goals. So hop in the chat, share your 2 takeaways from today. If I was gonna delete your brain and you could only remember 2 things from the last hour, what would those 2 things be? And pop it in the chat. And as you're doing that, I know I tend to not be the person who's gonna go right in the chat, but please do, because the act of writing it out and sending it out to the world really solidifies that learning to connect back to my neuron conversation. So what are your 2 big takeaways from today? tactics to create urgency, tightening the close, and coaching your sales team. Perfect. I'll give you guys a minute to do that. I love that. Don't be weird. That's a really good takeaway. Just don't be weird. Pricing is only weird if we make it weird. Always asking for the job. Can we team up and do this? Clarify and validate all the way along. Perfect. Avoiding a loss often influences people taking action and realizing the gain. Perfect. Thank you, everyone. Perfect. So some good takeaways from today. Solidify those so you can go take action on those. So some next steps for you guys. First things first, anything that we talked about today where you're like, ooh, I want to go deeper on that, or I want to go get some coaching on that, go to your advisor, have it added to your roadmap. That's important. Next one, when you're coaching your sales reps events, if you're leading a sales team, we've got this really great tool called AccuMax Index. Gives you really great insights into recruiting and leading those individuals. So you get 10 free assessments with Cultivate as being part of the community. So make sure you're using those. And if you want, if you fall in love with AccuMax and you want to go to the next level, AccuMax Pro, reach out to advisor and we'll hook you up. But make sure you're using your 10 assessments that are part of it. If you want to watch this again and go through it slower and study it a little bit, go into our community, click on courses, and you can go watch any of our CEO webinars again. So you can feel free to go in and ahead and watch that. Next piece, April calendar. All right, so we've got 2 super fun events coming up. Want to make sure it's in your calendar. Number 1, speed networking. So that is on April 1st. April 1st, speed networking. If you are especially in B2B, you'd be crazy if you're not showing up there. Hop online, meet other people, other business owners in our community. Let's all go do business together so we can all grow. And then the next one is Catapult. We had this big multi-day event in person. We're virtual this year. And so we've got a spring Catapult and a fall Catapult. And so our spring Catapult is April 22nd. Make sure you've got that in your calendar. We've got an amazing lineup of speakers. Make sure you take advantage of that. Last piece, because I'm a recruiter, I'm going to plug, if you know somebody who you think would be an amazing business advisor, we would love an introduction. We have a very, we have a thank you Cultivate gift here that we'd love to send along to you. So if you know somebody who you think would be awesome and would love helping small business owners, send them our way. So with that said, I'm going to bring up our panel and we are going to do some Q&A. So if you have any questions that you want to ask the panel, pop it in and share your questions. And then we're going to ask Angie and Colin some questions here. Hello, Angie.
Hello.
Perfect. Awesome. All right, so if you have any questions, feel free to throw it in the chat. Otherwise, so my question for you guys is, when you think about what's the difference between somebody who has a 35% close rate and a 50% close rate? What's the 1 or 2 things that you think is like the biggest difference between those 2 types of salespeople? Now, whoever wants to go can go first, but that's my first question.
That's a great question. Because 35% is not a bad close rate. Mm-hmm. So I think there's probably some minor things that can be done, and maybe better qualification up front, knowing who you are a good fit with and who you aren't. Asking the budget question up front. I think Colin referenced, don't be weird about money. Even on the sales side, people can get weird about asking what the budget is, and the typical answer is, oh, I don't know, how much should it be? So really learning how to navigate those in an authentic way, so you don't waste a lot of time if you're like worlds apart on what it costs for your services and what the person has to spend.
Yeah, totally agree. I would say it comes down to how much homework you do. What I mean by that is, like, how much time have you really taken to research the client, to the point where, like, if I'm working with a business owner that's written a book, for example, I'll buy the book and I'll hold it up on screen and I'll be like, hey, I noticed you wrote this, I had a couple questions on this, and they're instantly locked in, way more aligned. And when I also say homework, I mean, like, how often do you practice? Like, I hear a lot of people say, I'm worried about objection handling. I'm like, can you practice it where you can just rattle it off like it's a grocery list? Or do you freeze in the moment? Like, because I wasn't comfortable originally, but I just drilled myself over and over and over again, where it wasn't a big deal when it came. So just like anything, like if you're not practicing this stuff and you're not serious about working on it outside of the sale, you're not going to get better at it.
Perfect. Thanks.
That's so true.
Let's go to a question from Jenny. So she says, I have a business that has an admissions coaching, and that has one main deadline a year. We try to get people to start early, but these students procrastinate. Any specific tactics to get them to start early on their applications? Whoever wants to go first can. Put you on the spot here. Or any
go ahead, Colin.
I would want to know if there's any sort of holidays or deadlines or that sort of stuff around that. Like I cut out a little bit on the question, but if it was something around like students getting engaged, like I'd want to know what the deadlines and holidays are that might shift things. Like for example, in a design build, you might say, do you want this house done by Christmas? Right. So I'd want to look at holidays and deadlines and things like that to help move the date up if I could.
I was thinking sort of in a similar fashion, but what are the benefits, and really making sure we're clear with the, I assume this is students and parents we're talking about, talking with them about what are the benefits of getting it done sooner. Maybe it's peace of mind. Maybe it's having time to evaluate other alternatives or other options. The more time you put into something, generally, the better prepared you are, the better you show up. So if you think about college or high school, if you cram for an exam the night before, generally speaking, you're not going to do as well as you do if you study and put time into it over a period of time. And I think that's probably relevant with what you're doing as well.
Perfect. I'll add in an exercise that I would do with you, Jenny, is like think through, I'm like, let's brainstorm all the reasons that they shouldn't procrastinate and come up with a list of 10, 15 reasons why they shouldn't procrastinate. And then options would be, you might put one of those reasons into each email to make an email campaign around why they shouldn't procrastinate would be an idea for you. Let's do one last question here and then we will log off. What are our non-standardized services businesses? We don't have concrete pricing. We typically have a prospect call, then email them a proposal, which they accept or reject or ignore sometimes. Angela says here, so should we have a meeting to review the proposal instead? What would you guys say?
Yes. I always encourage my clients to, when we think about next step selling, always encourage them to, if you have a conversation with the prospect around what to expect and kind of what your thoughts are, but then when it comes to actually presenting that proposal or here's what we're going to do for you, do it over Zoom, do it in person. Don't just send it into the email abyss.
Perfect.
Totally agree. Yeah, I wouldn't even give them the option to do it over email. Like it's very, very hard to sell over email. I would make them do it in person. And if they're like, well, can you just email it to me? It's like, that's like me calling a real
saying, yeah, never send the price. You got to sit down so you can help them process through it, because our goal is to be the detective and help them move the blocks that come up inevitably when we have a proposal in front of us. So absolutely. Perfect. Thank you, Angie and Colin. And so with that, sorry? So with that said, guys, thanks for joining. So if you want more on what we talked about today, you can go into our community course and you'll see the courses around prescriptive selling by yours truly if you want to go slower through any of this stuff here today, and dynamic leadership if you want to go deeper on coaching sales reps. So thank you again for everyone to join. If you want to stay on and do some networking, we'll have the room open for about a half hour here, so feel free to hop into that. Otherwise, if you have any other questions, contact us at hello@cultivativeadvocate.com. Have a great rest of the Thursday, guys.